Morning, good afternoon to everyone joining us. Welcome to the product webinar, where we will be covering two topics which have come out of our latest release. The agenda we'll be going through is a quick introduction and a few housekeeping items. We'll be then diving into embedded analytics, MS Teams integration, and we'll open up for Q&A in the end. So starting with introduction and a few housekeeping items. My name is Malika Singh. I'm the Director of Product and Customer Experience at People Scout. I'll be hosting and presenting this session today. From a housekeeping perspective, can we please use the Q&A feature as you have any questions during the webinar? You can also choose to post the questions anonymously if you wish. The chat option is enabled as well, and we will be recording the session and sharing it with the audience. I'm going to start with the first section, which is an overview on embedded analytics. With our latest release, 7.31, we have introduced an embedded analytics feature within Springboard. Embedded analytics gives you visual insight into all things recruitment within your organization. The technology behind our embedded dashboard is AWS QuickSight. As the first iteration of this module, we have introduced 7 dashboards. One is open requisition, hiring activity, source performance and ROI, diversity, recruitment activity, RTH processing, and candidate interaction. From a UI and user experience perspective, there is a very consistent approach. There are 3 main areas, and we will look into that in a live demonstration today. The first section has visual charts, that is the analysis section. The details section lets you dive into the data behind the charts, and the control section lets you filter and slice and dice the information as required. The access to these dashboards is based on role permission. And once you've been assigned the right role and permission, you will see a new analytics module on the left-hand side. We're going to delve into each of these modules through the presentation first, and then I will pop into a live demonstration. Starting with the open requisition. The open requisition dashboard provides you basically an operational visual insight into the current state of recruitment within your organization. It reports on hiring progress of positions. Hiring managers and recruiters can leverage this dashboard to track the progress of hiring against planned target. You can identify jobs and hiring team members that may need extra help, and also helps you understand jobs and position distributed across your organization based on the job family, location, or job type. It's really helpful in gauging your requisition volume and measuring key metrics like time to fill. Now, what's the data behind these charts? Open requisition relies on the number of job requisitions you have open within the organization, the number of positions linked to those requisitions, the requisition status, and it has a default filter of current year, which you can amend later. When we get into the live demonstration, I will take you through the calculation behind each of these key metrics. But this is the dashboard where we capture the average days to fill, average days to hold, and some other important operational metrics. The next dashboard is the recruitment activity dashboard. It is useful for gauging trends and metrics related to candidate movement and volume at each stage. Hiring managers and recruiters can leverage this dashboard to understand what's really happening within each step of the recruitment process. You can identify bottlenecks, which are either attributed to your posting performance or any overdue candidate outreach. A lot of our times, our customers have revised targets on time to fill, and the combination of open requisition and recruitment activity dashboard can really help you identify and understand any bottlenecks throughout the recruitment process, which essentially can be streamlined. The hiring activity dashboard enables talent leaders to have a visual insight to quickly and comprehensively assess the status of their recruitment initiative, as well as set goals based on current performance trends. Hiring managers can look at past data, they can look at what is happening within the organization today, and really put together a plan, identify any peak seasons from a recruitment perspective, and forecast accordingly. The source performance dashboard, along with ROI, provides you insights into how and from where candidates are entering your talent pipeline, your talent database, and how is each of the source performing. Really helps you understand the ROI and the spend on the job market spending to identify trends and changes in top of funnel activity. The diversity dashboard within embedded in analytics provides you a complete picture of your candidate demographic. Now, the charts on this dashboard are as good as the information captured during the application process. If within your organization, you're asking diversity questions to the candidates, these dashboards will fill up. As a first iteration, we've looked at some very basic metrics from a demographic perspective. Things like gender, first nation hires, at-sea questions, but we look at this all in a bit in action. Our candidate interaction dashboard really helps you understand how candidates are interacting on your career side and their experience during the application process. There are charts within this dashboard which helps you understand the need of a mobile optimized career portal. You can look into application completion abandonment rate. You can also see how and when candidates abandoned your application process. You can delve and understand if this is linked to any specific questionnaire or a step within the workflow, so you can streamline that. The request to hire dashboard provides you a very basic overview of the state of request to approve or request to hire, howsoever you reference that within your organization. It gives you the total number of RTH approvals within the organization, but also tells you what is the average days it takes from the time the request was raised to the job getting approved. Now, we initially within the open requisition dashboard looked at average time to fill. That combined with your average days on the RTH approval can give you a very comprehensive idea of how much time it takes from when a request to hire request was raised within your organization to the position being filled. So as we just went through an overview of the 7 dashboards, I will be now popping into Springboard and taking you through these dashboards and also talk about the general navigation. We will process in the same order as we went through on the presentation. So when you land on Springboard, if you've got the right access, which is the access to the analytics module, on the left-hand menu buttons, you will see analytics as an additional module. On click of that, you will land on the dashboard page where we've got 7 dashboards created, but if you want to just give access to limited dashboards to different team members, there is a capability to do that as well. From a general navigation perspective, there are 3 sections I would like to highlight. The first is your chart section, where all the charts within the dashboard exist, and that is called analysis. The details section is the data behind the charts. And the third area is controls, which is the ability to slice and dice the data based on standard filters. Now, from a standard perspective, we have tried to include filters which are relevant to most of our customer base. So you can filter on the date the requisition was created for a certain time period. When you're looking at requisition activity within the organization, you can filter on the recruiters within the team, your hiring managers, location, and depending on how your organization is structured, we can go up to 5 levels of the organized structure. By default, each of the dashboards has a default time period. The default time period filter on open requisition is this year. So open requisition, like I said, provides you an operational overview of recruitment within the organization. The current open requisition gives you a number of all the open requisition during this year. Now, within Springboard, a single requisition can have multiple positions. So the current open position is the aggregate of all the positions which are linked to the 500 open requisitions. And then current unfilled position just gives you how many positions are still unfilled at this time. As we move on to current jobs on hold, this is simply the status which is on hold. So every requisition which has the status of on hold will be picked up in this metric. The average days on hold is the count of requisition on hold status divided by the time period. And average days to fill is calculated as a sum of time to fill all requisition closed within the date range divided by the total number of requisitions closed within that date range. Now, keep in mind the time and the date is corresponding to the working days. Now, this is something we've calculated as the first iteration. If any tweaks are required to average days to fill, depending on your organization, we would welcome the opportunity to talk and work with you on changing the calculation just for your organization on average days to fill. The next set of charts gives you an overview of what is happening with all the open requisition by job type, your job group, and location. As you hover over certain sections of the chart, the entire dashboard automatically changes. So I have hovered and selected the requisitions which are open for an average of more than 90 days, and all the corresponding charts have now updated. I can see that in this category, the open requisition by job type, they are majorly permanent roles. And primarily, the key locations where the hiring is happening is South Australia and a flexible location. So these could be your remote locations. You can also see where you've got requisitions open for more than 90 days. Who are the recruiters? How many average days have they got the requisition open for? And then we have tried to combine 2 key metrics. What are the total position versus unfilled position open by recruiter? This really helps you to not just mark the performance within the team, but also understand areas of bottleneck or struggle which you can work with your team and move and distribute the requisitions accordingly. At any time, you can reset your dashboard by click of this button, and it will bring up the core data. Moving on to the next chart, the recruitment activity. Open requisition and recruitment activity are two operational and tactical dashboard. It really delves in the current state of recruitment activity across the organization. The recruitment activity delves into the workflow performance. You're able to get into each of the stages and of the workflow, the recruitment workflow, which you've got set up in the organization. You can see how many candidates, and depending on the type of job, where exactly time is spent. So in this particular chart, you can see the median days in current activity step. So you can see that for fixed term contract, the average days in the interview step is 227. Now, the data which we are seeing today is on a test environment. So this would be different from your organization, but it is a great way to find out bottlenecks. Are you spending too much time for a particular job in the interview step? Are you spending too much time shortlisting your candidates? And if time to fill is a key metric within your organization, how can you work through that? This dashboard will really give you insight into. Moving on to the hiring activity dashboard, which gives you a bird's eye view of hiring activity in the past, so you can present and put together a recruitment plan and forecast for the future. This dashboard has charts and metrics like the total applications which have come into the database, the number of hires you've made at that particular time of the year. But two key metrics which are really interesting in this one is your application to hire ratio. This is a crucial benchmark that helps you determine how many candidates are needed on average to fill a role. The apply to hire date is key again, because it tells you that the number of days an applicant has gone through various steps before they are being hired. So again, a really good way to see how well are you progressing from a recruitment performance perspective. The hires by month gives you insight into what are your peak seasons. So for instance, you're a retail organization and you might be running a campaign which happens mid-year, and you can see that in the month of May, we had a peak of 251 roles. So this is a great way to see your seasonal peaks and drops. The hires by job type as well tells you a good breakdown of your workforce. In this case, we can see the majority of the workforce and the hires made this year are in the permanent category. And we can see there is fixed term employees as well, and contingent workforce, about 2% of those. So it gives you a good breakdown of your workforce. Then as we are talking about performance, these two dashboards gives you a view of activity by hiring managers. Now, in a decentralized model where you've got the recruitment team and hiring managers working on a role, there's a lot of dependency, and just being able to capture where time is spent by the hiring managers, whether it is the time in the interview step or which of the hiring managers are doing most of the hires. It gives you a good overview of how big, how much the team is growing, or there is a bit of turnaround under this hiring manager. So you can really look at the hiring manager metrics from these two charts. You can also see how hires are done by location. So we can see in this particular time period, which is May, that a lot of hires were made in South Australia. And looking at the previous chart in open requisition, where we look at the open requisitions by location, there's a correlation, because South Australia and New South Wales were the two locations where most of the hires happened. So you can tie back the two data points together to see where your business is growing from a location perspective. The two charts, the first one being the average days to hire by recruiter, gives you an overview of how many average days does, in this instance, Abigail take to hire a new candidate. And then hire by recruiter, you can see how your recruitment teams, how many people have they hired over the period of this year. Now, at any time, if you want to look at the past performance, you can filter through the time period and select past performance, which will give you an overview of what was the hiring activity like in the previous year. The next dashboard is the source performance and ROI. And we have combined two important metrics into this one single chart for you, where you're able to look at the number of applicants who are entering your system by source, but how many of those applicants who came from a particular source were converted as a hire within the organization. So in this instance, you can see that Seek has sent an average of 7,500 candidates, but the conversion is just 166, which leads it to be a 2.23% conversion rate. So it's a great way to measure your source performance, but also manage your spend within these external sources as well. As we move on to this conversion rate chart, you can see that your sources like your direct career site, your referral programs, and your going out proactively doing direct sourcing are actually your top performing channels. And these are channels when you're not spending extra dollars to source for candidates. So it's a great way to look at your ROI and re-establishing your cost based on the two areas. We can also look at the applicant and sources which have come over the different month. It's a great way to see where correlate this to the number of jobs which are open at a particular month and how the candidate flow is during that time. Moving on to the next one, the diversity dashboard. Now, this captures your demographic. And as I was explaining when we were looking at the presentation, that the source of these dashboard is the application questions. So asking and capturing questions like gender, the First Nation information, the ATSI question. If you do not capture the information during the application process, none of these charts would show up. Now, for the purposes of the demo, we've captured the number of hires by gender. So you can see that your workforce has a decent mix. 50% is male, and you've got about 30% who did not respond to this question. And just about 17% of your workforce is made up of females. The chart, which is applicants versus hired by gender, is a great way to look at how many applicants came by gender for male and how many of those converted as new hires. And you can also run conversion rates. You can also see that for females as well. And I will quickly scroll to the second section, which again breaks down your application by gender for the time period, for the job type, for job groups, and also by gender. Now, by group and by gender, you can see that most of your candidates who responded to the gender question did not respond to the age question. So here's an opportunity for you to look at, is this a relevant question during the application process? So you can look at the data in a lot of different ways, but everything demographic is captured under the diversity charts. The request to hire processing dashboard is a pretty simple dashboard. And the purpose of this dashboard is to make sure that we also capture the time period from when a request to hire was submitted to a job being approved. It also gives you a good sense of how many jobs were created through directly by job creation and how many of them went through an approval process via the request to hire. So right now in its simple state, but this metric is pretty key if you want to capture the total recruitment timeline for the moment the request to hire was submitted to the time when a new hire was put in place. And then the last dashboard is based on candidate interaction. In this particular dashboard, we've covered areas of interaction based on the devices the candidate is using on your career portal, primarily to highlight the fact of having a mobile-first consumer-like candidate experience. The second purpose of this dashboard is to help you assist with numbers of applications which are getting abandoned on your career portal. In this case, we've only had 5% abandonment rate, which per the industry standard is pretty decent. But then the dashboard around application abandoned and completion rates assigned by questionnaire helps you look into where candidates are abandoning your application process. And this could be related to the type of question that's been asked at the stage it's been asked. So it helps you look into those metrics and really make key decisions around your application process. Now, over the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen a big shift of moving from really long application forms to quick apply forms. And if you are in that journey and you want to see what is happening with your application process, this is a great chart to look at and delve deeper into the way the candidates are interacting with your process. Now, that is a very quick live demonstration of the charts we have added within Springboard. As I mentioned at the starting of this demonstration, that this is the first iteration of our embedded analytics. As you have feedback and the way you want how we can enhance this embedded analytics dashboard, we would love to have that conversation. So please do send your feedback. I will get into the question and answer at the end of the demonstration. Now that we've seen what is embedded analytics, what's included, what does it look like in live action? The next question is, how do you hang on to embedded analytics or get it enabled for your website? Please reach out to your account managers regarding setup and access. This is something we can enable pretty quickly, is done by our support team, but I would recommend a conversation with the account managers to get this going. To help our customers, we've also created self-help guides. And under the Help Center, the Zendesk Help Center, you would see 8 articles covering not just an overview of the dashboards and how to interact with it, but it goes into detail for each dashboard and highlights the charts which are under it. So please do pop into Help Center and have a look at these charts, and hopefully they answer all your questions. The next part we're going to cover today is MS Teams integration. Now, within Springboard, we have a native interview scheduling capability. That module helps you to not just create interviews, but also create face-to-face or digital URL interviews. There's also the opportunity to invite the candidates to self-book these interviews. This requires a lot of manual intervention. We have looked at it and tried to remove the manual intervention by integrating with MS Teams. What does that really mean is, if we have your MS Team account set up within Springboard, you can create interviews with the similar experience as you schedule meetings on MS Team. The interview one schedule will automatically pop into the team member, the panel member, the hiring manager's calendar, and for the candidate as well. Now, let's look at 3 simple steps to set this up. The first one is around the setup. We require to work with your IT team who manage the Microsoft Exchange to capture informations like tenant ID, your client ID, your secret key, which will be plugged in within Springboard, and that will enable the handshake between Springboard and your organization's Microsoft Exchange. Once this is set up, the new Teams option will be available within the existing interview screen. Now, the key here to note is nothing from a functional UI or UX perspective has been changed within the interview scheduling capability. The only change is the moment you select online, the MS Teams setup comes up if you have got that set up in the backend. Once you create a Teams with a MS Team option, the hiring panel and the candidate will receive a version of this email with the Teams link. But what they'll also get is a Teams invite, which will automatically go in their calendar. So you do not have to remember or save an iCal. It will automatically be available within your MS Teams calendar, your Outlook calendar. I'm now going to show you a quick demonstration of MS Teams. For the purposes of the demo, I've got a candidate who's sitting in the panel interview step. I will select the candidate and generate an interview for them. So the candidate details which I've selected gets auto-populated. And like I mentioned, a new online button is available, which once clicked will help you pick the MS Team video conferencing option. The moment that is selected, the location is online. You can select when you want to schedule the interview for, the time. Based on the duration, this gets automatically updated. And I will add myself as a panel member. So it pops up in my Teams calendar. Do a quick check and then send notification to candidate by default as calendar, because we do want the invite to sit within their calendar. I will save it, confirm. And what this is doing is it's schedule the interview in my Teams calendar. As a candidate and a hiring manager, you will receive an email with the Teams link, but also the Teams invite. So it pops automatically within your calendar, and the manual intervention which you had to do previously is no longer required. From a functionality perspective, the team setup is valid for both single interviews. It is valid for bulk interviews, and anybody who's part of the panel. So your hiring manager, your recruiter, your candidate, each of the member who is part of that interview will get an invite sent into their calendar. And very importantly, the functional flow of the interview remains as it is. There is just the additional ability to choose that it's an online interview. So that was a quick overview of the MS Teams integration which we've set up. Now, to help your IT team enable MS Teams, we've added a new article which goes into the depth of how to fetch the client ID, the tenant ID, from the Microsoft Exchange. It is published within the integration section of our help desk. And as a recruiter or a panel member, if you want to see how to use MS Teams with the integrated experience, we've published an article as well. Now, you do not need to remember all of this, because I will be sharing not just the recording, but also all the collateral and links, which are going to be handy, both from an embedded analytics perspective, but also from a scheduling perspective. Now, that gets us to the end of the demonstration for embedded analytics and MS Teams. I'm going to now pop into the Q&A and chat section and look for questions which you've posted as I was going through the demonstration and try and answer those. I'm going to start from the top, so I'm just scrolling up. Everybody's, I think you would have figured it out by now that the audience's mic and cameras were switched off because we wanted to go through the presentation, and we will be sharing not just the recording, but also all the other content as well. So if you have any questions, I'll repeat, please do feel free to pop it into the chat. If you want to post it anonymously, you can use the Q&A function.